parks. Yeah, okay. You know, they really are.
Yeah.
They are.
All right, we're going to begin in a couple
People
minutes.
don't even call me
About
on
30
Monday.
seconds.
I'm saying friends.
Please ensure your cell phones are off or on silent, and council members, ensure your microphones are turned on. All right, good evening, everybody. Today is March 27th, 2023. It is a regular legislative meeting for Barberton City Council. Before we begin the regular legislative meeting, we do have some individual committee meetings. So we will, it is 6:01 p.m. and we will start with City Properties, Parks and Recreation with Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties Park Recreation meeting March 27th, 2023 at 6:01. Location, council chambers, members present, myself as chair, Mr. Heidick is absent, and Mrs. Fry. Other council members are also noted. and guests are also noted. We have a couple of requests for legislation. Yep. The first one is appointment, a letter from Mayor Judge requesting appointment of Don Noor. That's his last name?
Nor.
I'm sorry?
Nor.
Noor, all right. Mr. Don Noor of the Parks Commission for an expired term starting immediately and ending in December 31st, 2027. Any requests, any questions or remarks from this gentleman?
It should be Dan North.
Dan Nor.
Dan? All right. Any questions, remarks? Ms. Angelo?
I'll make a remark. I worked with Dan Nor for 25 years, and it's so nice that he has retired from the city and has decided to come back and sit on a board or a commission, and was very happy to see that, so.
Awesome. Any other questions, remarks? Seeing none, a motion, please.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Fry first. I will second that. Take a vote, please.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have pending legislation, ordinance number 38-2023, into a contract with Surtech and ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter a contract with Surtech in the amount of $67,000 for the purchase and installation of surveillance systems in the parks and declaring an emergency. Any questions or remarks? Yes, ma'am.
The surveillance system's gonna be put in before the improvements, is that true, or, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, Mr. Patterson?
What improvements are you referring to?
Isn't there gonna be some kind of improvements to the park? Just besides surveillance, or it's just surveillance, just to see?
Well, there's several improvements in a few different parts. The cameras aren't going in.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Right. And that's more protection of the community and the property. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, remarks? Seeing none? All right. Next, we also have an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter a contract with the CXT in the amount of $120,000 to be used for the purchase of restrooms at McCaffrey Park and declare an emergency. Any questions or remarks?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You said a restroom?
Yes, ma'am, in McCaffrey Park.
I'm telling you, I like restrooms.
It's coming close. We're gonna have it soon, hopefully Lake Anna for
I'm
you too.
hoping the towpath will help us bring in a restroom to the park. I don't know how it's gonna connect, but didn't I tell you, I won't stop until I get it.
You're on it. You're awesome.
Working my way.
You got this. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's gonna we're gonna ask the railroad to help purchase that, or?
No, ma'am.
I didn't understand
No,
what.
it's going, actually, the restroom is from McCaffrey Park,
Oh, okay.
but restrooms at Lake Anna, we're still looking at.
Right, but let's go back to McCaffrey Park. What the CSX is, isn't that the?
That's the name of the company that's supplying the
Oh, I
restroom.
thought it was.
Yeah, not the rail, yeah.
CXT.
Okay,
CXT,
I'm just an
yeah.
associator. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other remarks or questions? All right, open this up for miscellaneous discussion. Mr. Patterson, can you give us some information about the skate park that was announced last week?
We're working with American Ramp, so we're just kind of in the stages of getting the project together, and setting up a public meeting, kind of get going to the final stages of
Oh, thank you. Yes.
I didn't catch the final stages of what, a park or what?
it. Skate park at Decker Park.
Oh, really? Ice skate park or,
Like roller, skateboard,
Skateboard.
okay.
bikes,
And you checked into that, right? Because Stowe has one.
yes.
Okay. I'm not trying to be dumb. You know, I just, I've been around and I know what they run into. Okay, very good. I count on you to do your homework. You know what I'm saying? The young people do need something. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Any other miscellaneous discussions? All right. Seeing none, motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Mrs. Fry. I will second that. And we are adjourned today at 6:06, sir, and with that I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Jabbert. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. The time is 6:06, I think, and it is Monday evening, March 27th. We are in council chambers. I'm bringing the Public Welfare and Safety Committee meeting to order. All members of the committee are present. That would be me as chair, Mr. Griffin, and Mrs. Coburn as members of the committee. All council members are also present with the exception of Mr. Heidig, who is off this evening. We have one new piece of legislation being requested. It is a letter from Robert Inkervati, Court Administrator for Barberton Municipal Court, requesting legislation to authorize the Director of Finance to pay an invoice in the amount of $4,300 to cover an expenditure exceeding $3,000 by the Barberton Probation Department. Emergency wording is requested, and I don't know if everybody has it, but I do have a copy of the invoice, and the reason this is going through is because the invoice was, there was no PO. We received the invoice and we didn't have a PO, so they created one on 310, and we're going to pay this $4,300. Are there any remarks or questions about this piece of legislation? No.
So
Yes.
the actual thing is, maybe I misunderstand it, the only reason it didn't go through in the beginning is because the PO wasn't there.
Well, you had to have the PO in
That's
order
what
to
I'm
pay
saying.
it,
Some
and they didn't
documents
have
the
the...
correct stuff, and that was the only reason it wasn't.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make a motion that we call for this.
Thank you, Joyce. Motion made by Mrs. Coburn, seconded by Mr. Griffin. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We have a couple pieces of legislation, one piece of legislation on the agenda for this evening, and it is titled Rail Safety, and it is a resolution urging the legislative branches of the federal government as well as the state of Ohio to enact legislation to further protect the citizens of the city of Barberton, Ohio, from the inherent dangers of a train derailment on the tracks located at or near our city and declaring an emergency. Does anybody have any questions? Did everyone get the article that Lori prepared?
Yep.
Okay.
You have a question right there.
Are we asking for money
No.
No, we're asking for legislation
to make the railroads pay?
to make the railroads safer.
Okay, but you don't, do you know what's in the registration?
They don't
Is it-
have it yet, they're working on it,
Okay, oh, okay.
and we are in support of it.
Right,
So-
what they're working on right now.
Yes.
Do you understand? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, we'll be voting on that this evening. Does anyone have any miscellaneous discussion for public welfare and safety?
I think I do.
Yes?
I don't know how to put it in what category. Your city workers, your city employees.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work for the city back when I had the opportunity to retire from there. I got a pension from there.
Mm-hmm.
And healthcare, okay. I see your employees, I don't know, I'm limited on my vocabulary, looking like slots. I met a gentleman, a number 3, that's a number 3 that operates a sweeper, as my terminology goes, one of the high ones up there. He had this yellow, those neon jackets, it was all kinds of stuff here. Oh, I understand. I talked to him about that, and I talked to him also, he's operating a sweeper. I'm used to be the broom builder. I used to operate the sweep. I used to operate everything the city of Akron has, and I'm not bragging, but this is me, okay? He was operating with that sweeper without turning on his water. I mean, dust was flying, dust was tearing up his lungs and my lungs, because the stuff you don't see, that's the stuff that will kill you. I stopped him and I said something to him. Oh, I'm just going down to the terminal. I'm done for the day. Okay, if you're done for the day, pick up those brooms. You should not continue. This tears up your machines. I'm a taxpayer. Those machines are very expensive.
We know.
Tell me, I know. I used to take care of them. I did maintenance on them. Okay. Same number 3. Okay, we're gonna jump back just the other day. The same number 3. I'm just telling you a story. I don't judge anybody, but,
What is number 3?
oh, number 3 is high up in the department. You're operating all kinds of equipment.
Oh, okay.
And number
I know
2
what you're
just
saying, number
Okay,
3.
and number
Okay, I
2
thought you were
just
referring
drives
to
I'm sorry.
a number on his truck or something.
Right. Anyway, I saw the same guy at Circle K,
Mhm.
and he's buying lottery tickets. Don't, you know, I'm a nosy girl, you can tell that. And I said something to him. Oh, you're a city worker. He says, yeah, don't you remember me? Caught me up there by the school. It was a school, now it's a church or whatever. Talked to me about my brooms. I said, I sure did. And you still haven't changed. And I said, you still haven't changed your jacket, the neon jacket with stains. You know what, when I was working, we had them, and the stains were hard to get out, but all you had to do is wash them in Gojo. Now they make that stuff, you just wash them. And, you know, wash them in good soap, and I know that because I go to the laundromat, and they do that. And I says, who's your foreman? This is what got me more than anything. The mayor. That's exactly, talk to the mayor. I said, no, I want to go a chain of command. Do you understand what a chain of command is? A chain of command is,
Yes, I
Yeah,
understand.
we
what-
understand. We
the
thought.
mayor. No, I want your foreman. He would not give me the foreman's name. Because I'm the one, I'm gonna call the foreman, I'm gonna talk to the foreman. Whether he laughs at me, jokes with me, like I told them, you work for the city of Barberton. You maintain the roads, the streets, whatever, and I expect it to be done with pride, and I expect you to look with pride. If you don't want the job, if you're tired,
Excuse me, the safety director wants to weigh in on this.
I'm the safety director and the HR director. If you have an issue, we could talk about it. I'll give you my business card.
right.
I just don't want to have you talking about an employee about.
Oh, I
like
don't
that.
need the employee. Well, see what? He would not tell me his foreman's name.
Well,
All he had to do was see.
I can assist you with that.
Okay, I need a
Okay.
card.
Well, I'll get it at the break. I don't have it with
See,
me.
I come from a different city. You know, if somebody would come up to me and say something, you need to talk to Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly is my foreman. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But, well, okay, I'm sorry about that. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other items? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin and seconded by Mrs. Coburn, and we are adjourned at 6:15 PM. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fry. Next up is Rules Marketing and Development with Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to call this meeting to order, Rules Marketing Development. I'd like to call this meeting to order today, March 27th. We're all in council chambers, all members present except Mr. Nady, excused. Tonight, we have no request for legislation. Do I have any miscellaneous discussion from the council members or anyone else in attendance? Yes.
I'm not done.
This, ma'am, please, this is for his committee first, and
Okay, I didn't, okay, then I'm not sure what your committee was.
Rules Marketing and Development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion? Anybody else?
for rules,
For rules.
I have nothing.
Okay, hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
That motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. We'll adjourn at 6:16. With that, I pass it.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Next up, city utilities with Mrs. Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring to order city utilities. It is 6:17. All members are present, myself as chair, Carol and Mrs. Bailey. All others as noted on my paper. We have one new request for legislation, multiple, but we have a letter from Caroline Crawford, Stormwater Manager, requesting legislation authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute a memorandum of agreement, MOA, with Summit Soil and Water Conservation District for watershed services to provide conservation, technical, and educational assistance, inspections of stream channels, and that
Riparian.
riparian areas, development and implementation of protocols to manage stream maintenance, create and amend the non-point source implementation strategy, NPS-IS plan, and collection of technical data that corresponds to the city's watershed goals. We're requesting an emergency wording request. Since she's not here, is there anyone that wishes to give us any other insight? This is pretty self-explanatory in my opinion. It's for any areas that dump into our water. Do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion to call for it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We have a letter from Todd Shreve, interim director, requesting legislation authorizing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and services used in the ordinary and daily operation of municipal departments in the city of Barberton for 2023. Emergency wording is requested, and this will be referred to streets. This is something we have to do every year so that they can take care of everyday business within the city. Does anyone have any questions on my committee? From council? Okay, do I have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion to call.
that.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a letter from Todd Shreve, interim director, requesting legislation to enter into contract with M-Tech in the amount of $554,905 for the purchase of a new GAP vac combination jet vacuum machine. Emergency wording is requested. In the letter we received, he explained that this was included in the budget, and this price is from Ohio STS pricing under contract, and he gave us the number for that. And this will be purchased procurement under the Ohio Revised Code. Are there any questions about this one from my committee? From council? Do we have a motion to call for this?
I will make a motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have no pending legislation at this time. Is there any miscellaneous discussion from council on utilities? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will
Mrs.
make a
Fry?
motion.
I'll second that.
We are adjourned at 6:22.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. And Finance and Personnel, Mr. Heidick is absent today, and so Mrs. Coburn will be doing Finance and Personnel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call Finance and Personnel to order. It is 6:23. All members are present. Mr. Heidick is absent as chairperson. I'm second. Mrs. Taylor and Mr. Greer are also on the committee. Tonight we have requests for legislations are reserved for committee of the whole nights because we vote on them the following week. Is that correct?
Correct.
So tonight, we have pending legislation with Parks to enter into the contract Securitech, an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into contract with Securitech in the amount of $67,000 for the purchase and installation of surveillance systems in the parks and declaring an emergency. Mr. Jaber did explain that camera system, so if there's, should anybody have any questions about that? The next one is a resolution 41-2023, the local government fund restoration, a resolution strongly urging the Ohio governor and members of the Ohio General Assembly to restore the local government fund to pre-recession levels and declaring an emergency. This is something we do every year, requesting him to give us back our money we're due out of the rainy day fund. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
And one of the reasons that we do this every year is that it seems to sprout up almost every year down in Columbus, and last year they tried to throw it in kind of tail end of the budget process to remove more. So when it sprouts up, we kind of come together with other communities to have it reinstated.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone on that? We'll be voting on that resolution this evening. We have ordinance number 44-2023, amending ordinance number 63-2021, employees not included in non-bargaining pay grades. An ordinance amending ordinance number 63-2021, employees, it's a repeat of the same thing I just read, in order to increase the pay scale of seasonal and Department of Public Safety employees retroactive to March 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency. This is to help the city be able to hire people to work over the summer at a decent rate and to bring the others up. Is that correct, Ms.?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any questions on that from the committee? We'll be voting on this tonight. It already came out of committee. So, yes.
I don't know how to say it, but say it. You need more women out there. You need to recruit them. I'm 70 years old. I just told you my resume. I don't see those women on those jobs. Barberton has to do a better job. What them women look like, however.
Well, we
I
put
understand.
applications out, and
Yeah.
women are asked to apply, but
They need to be more encouraged. I think Barberton should try to do that somehow or the other. Like I said, I made a living. I'm embarrassed to tell you what my pension is. Only reason I'm embarrassed because I'm financially in debt. That's why I'm embarrassed. How can I be embarrassed with that much? But please try to get more women in. Or it doesn't have to, yes, I would like, I proved it. There's many women have proved it. So please, thank you. If you can, I'm going to get my restroom.
do we have any miscellaneous discussion for the finance department tonight? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not even on the committee.
Thank you. I'll put anybody's initials
Yeah,
down.
well, I was supposed to, on finance, I was supposed to,
That's something else.
yeah, I know, it
We're
is.
adjourned at 6:27.
Thank you, Mrs. Tobin. That concludes our regular committee meeting for this week. We will take a 10-minute break for recipients of
Did she leave?
I couldn't help it.
Did
Now it is.
she leave?
Okay. I couldn't help myself.
She's a pain.
Oh, man.
Something to say about everything.
All right, today is Monday, March 27th, 2023. This is a regular legislative meeting for Barberton City Council. I call this meeting to order at 6:37 PM. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by an invocation by Mrs. Coburn. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, we are meeting today to conduct matters of business. Guide our hearts and our minds in the spirit and of faithfulness, right thought, and speech. Impart your supreme wisdom upon our activities. Bless those that protect us both here and away, and watch over all of us this evening. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Coburn. Clerk, please call the roll.
President Greer.
Present.
Mr. Heidick, absent. Mrs. Thompson.
Here.
Mrs. Bailey.
Here.
Mrs. Angela.
Here.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mr. Jagan.
Here.
Mrs. Coburn.
Here,
Mrs. Frye.
Here.
Approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 13th, 2023. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the approval of the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 13th, 2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I second Mrs. Thompson's motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mrs. Fry to approve the minutes of the regular legislative meeting held on Monday, March 13th, 2023, as presented. Are there any remarks? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are adopted. Petitions and claims.
We have none.
Thank you. Matters requested.
They have all been dispersed.
Thank you. Citizens addressing council. There was none. At this time, we are going to take a short recess while we stay and present the resolutions to Captain Michael Coral and firefighter Kevin Thacker. I do, right there.
Resolution 11-2023, titled Commendation, Captain Michael Coral. A resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton to honor and give public recognition to Captain Michael Coral for his 28 years of dedicated service to the City of Barberton Fire Department and to this community. Whereas Michael J. Coral was hired as a firefighter on February 20th, 1995, he was promoted to lieutenant on April 17th, 2003, and captain on May 11th, 2018. And whereas during his service to the fire department and city, Captain Coral set up and organized the public education program with the Barberton City Schools in 1997, participated in the juvenile fire stopper program through Akron City Hospital, Akron Children's Hospital, and was a member of the Barberton Red Cross, president of the board for 2 years, and took over the fire department hose inventory program. And whereas Captain Coral received numerous awards, which include the 1999 Service Above Self Award from the Barberton Rotary Club, and in 2001 received the Circle of Friends Award from the Barberton Education Association. And whereas Captain Coral retired from the Barberton Fire Department on February 22nd, 2023. And whereas Captain Coral loves to vacation with his family, wife Erin, stepson Nicholas, stepdaughter Madeline, and a dog named Charlie. And whereas this council, along with the administration, the Barberton Fire Department, and citizens, wish Mike health and happiness for years to come. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Barberton, State of Ohio, Section 1, that the Council of the City of Barberton hereby honors and gives public recognition to Captain Michael Coral for his 28 years of dedicated service to the Barberton Fire Department and to this community. Section 2, that it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council and any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were meetings open to the public in compliance and with the law. Section 3, that this resolution shall be in force and effect from and after the earliest period allowed by law, passed unanimously by the Barberton City Council on February 27th, 2023.
Thank you. Captain Crow, congratulations. You come up and take your resolution. Council members, you guys are encouraged to come up as well.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
Congratulations. Enjoy your retirement.
Speech. You got a speech prepared?
Just want to thank all the residents, all the council, and all the previous elected officials that I've worked with, all the members of the fire department over the years. It's been a great career that I've had here, and it has gone very, very quick. I can't believe that it's been 28 years. I still remember coming to City Hall and filling out the paperwork to take the civil service. I remember my first day of work walking across the front of the station and ringing the doorbell 28 years ago, and the time has gone. But it was a great department, great guys. I know the citizens are very fortunate, very lucky to have the professional firefighters that we do have here. They take pride in their work, they work hard, they are well educated, and they're very compassionate, and they are always there willing to step up and help the citizens in any way. And it has truly been an honor to work with all the guys on the department and with the citizens here in Barberton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, you got anything?
Well, we're gonna miss both Captain Coral and firefighter Thacker. Just want to say that it's been an honor working with both of them. Mike has been very instrumental when I took over, helping me get things organized and that, and even when he was the acting chief, he was a very good leader. And as you could see, he was very well involved with our fire prevention program and bringing that all up to where it needed to be. As you'll hear with Kevin, he was very much into our technical rescue aspect of the fire department in regards to ropes, confined space, and that. He was always very helpful when it comes to tinkering and fixing with stuff. So it's a bittersweet moment because I know they're moving on, but they'll be definitely missed by all of us there. So congratulations, both of you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you for your service, Captain. All right, next we're going to present the Resolution 12-2023 to firefighter Kevin Thacker.
Resolution number 12-2023, title, Commendation, Firefighter Kevin Thacker. A resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton to give honor and give public recognition to Kevin Thacker for his 28 years of dedicated service to the City of Barberton Fire Department and to this community. Whereas Kevin Thacker, a Navy veteran, began his career as a Barberton firefighter on April 10, 1995, and whereas Kevin has had many accomplishments over his career, including being part of the Barberton Fire Department Honor Guard, Barberton Fire Department Technical Rescue Operations Team, Summit County Technical Rescue Operations Team, Barberton Fire Department Truck Committee, and held various offices and served on committees within the BFFA Local 329, including Secretary, Vice President, and President. And whereas Kevin's knowledge and experience have earned him numerous letters of recognition, awards, and citations through his career, His dedication will be greatly missed, as his last date with the Barberton Fire Department was February 10th, 2023. And whereas Kevin and his wife Lisa raised son Joseph and daughter Nicole, Kevin has one grandchild who he no doubt will have the opportunity to take fishing. And whereas Kevin will be hard to replace because of his dedication and the great pride he took in his work. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Barberton, State of Ohio, Section 1, that the Council of the City of Barberton hereby honors and gives public recognition to firefighter Kevin Thacker for his 28 years of dedicated service to the Barberton Fire Department and to this community. Section 2, that it is hereby found and determined that all formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of this council, and all deliberations of this council and any of its committees that resulted in such formal action were meetings open to the public in compliance with the law. Section 3, that this resolution shall be in full force and effect from and after the earliest period allowed by law. Passed unanimously by the Barberton City Council on February 27th, 2023.
Thank you. Firefighter Thacker, please step up and accept the resolution.
Since Mike pretty much covered everything, doesn't leave me much to say. I'd just like to thank the city for allowing me the opportunity to serve the citizens of Barberton and allowing me to work with a great set of guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else want to say anything? Mayor?
Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge and thank Captain Coral and Firefighter Thacker for all of your service over the years. And we really are fortunate here in the city of Barberton to have a great group here. And just you guys can go back and look at the things that have changed over your tenure here and just in firefighting in general. So whether that's operations or the training that you guys go through, and we see the stats in the annual report of how many runs you go on each year, but we've had recently, COVID, we've had the opiate epidemic. Whenever there's a flood, they're out there working with the residents and saving them, and just a lot of work that kind of is a little, I'll say, somewhat unique to Barberton that you guys do. And then I don't know if it's customary, I've seen a number of firefighters retire, and it's like one of the first things you guys do, since you can't have a goatee or a beard, is grow one. So thank you guys for your service and everything that you have done to keep us safe while we sleep well at night. So thank you.
Mrs. Eisman?
I just wanted to say that I had the pleasure of working with both of you. Captain, you were one of the first individuals I got to know when I first started my position when you were acting chief, and we worked very well together. And Kevin I've known for a very long time, but I just want to say I'm very happy for you. It was a pleasure working with both of you, and I know you'll both enjoy your retirement very much, especially your wives. Yeah.
All right, anybody else? Well, I just want to say thank you guys for your dedication to the community, and want to thank your family too for letting us borrow them and our community borrow them. So now they're all yours too. If there's nothing else, we'll just give one last round of applause for these guys. And we won't bore you guys with the stuff that comes next, so we'll give you a minute or two to mingle real fast and head out if you guys want.
She's looking at
No. I think it's like, I don't know, they said so, yeah. Yeah. So then you have the opportunity to like talk to people after.
Like you said, you got, you know, just, you know.
All right. Next up is first reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Ordinance number 38-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber and Mr. Heidick. Title, enter into contract SecureTech. An ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a contract with SecureTech in the amount of $67,000 for the purchase and installation of surveillance systems in the parks and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Jaber's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent. Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of ordinance number 38-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second that motion for adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 38-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 39-2023, presented by Mrs. Thompson. Title, Project Impact Rules. An ordinance amending ordinance number 155-2016, sale of land bank properties to reflect updates to the Project Impact Program and declaring an emergency. This will go 3 readings. Resolution number 40-2023, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, Final Resolution ODOT 4th Street Northwest Resurfacing. A resolution of the Council of the City of Barberton authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for the improvement of 4th Street Northwest, PID 115350, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent. Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Angeloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution number 40-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt resolution number 40-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent. Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Resolution number 41-2023, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title, Local Government Fund Restoration. a restoration strongly urging the Ohio Governor and members of the Ohio General Assembly to restore the local government fund to pre-recession levels and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Coburn's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Heidig is absent. Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution number 41-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Coburn's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to adopt resolution number 41-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidig is absent. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Resolution number 42-2023, presented by Mrs. Frye. Title, Rail Safety. A resolution urging the legislative branches of the federal government as well as the state of Ohio to enact legislation to further protect the citizens of the city of Barberton, Ohio from the inherent dangers of a train derailment on the tracks located at and near our city and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Griffin to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidig? Whoops, Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
And Mr. Heidig is absent.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of resolution number 42-2023.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Fry and seconded by Mr. Griffin to adopt resolution number 42-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Heidig is absent. Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Motion for adoption. Oh, sorry. It passes.
Ordinance
We're
number
comfortable on my paper.
43-2023, presented by Mrs. Angela. Title, Enter into Contract, Kunkel and Sons Property Maintenance, LLC. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into contract with Kunkel and Sons Property Maintenance, LLC, the lowest and/or best bidder, in the amount of $64,962.26 for the 2023 East Houston sewer construction and declaring an emergency.
It's in the air. Motion to suspend, Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. And Mrs. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angela's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent. Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 43-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to second Mrs. Angeloff's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. Bailey to adopt ordinance number 43-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angeloff?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 44-2023, presented by Mr. Heidick. Title: Amending Ordinance number 63-2021, Employees not included in non-bargaining pay grades. An ordinance amending ordinance number 63-2021, Employees not included in non-bargaining pay grades, in order to increase the pay scale of seasonal and Department of Public Safety employees retroactive to March 1st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Coburn's motion on suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent.
Thank you. Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 44-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Coburn's motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Coburn and seconded by Mrs. Thompson to adopt ordinance number 44-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent.
Thank you. Motion for adoption carries.
Ordinance number 45-2023, presented by Mr. Jaber. Title: Enter into contract CXT Incorporated. An ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into contract with CXT Incorporated in the amount of $120,000 to be used for the purchase of restrooms for McCafferty Park and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Motion to suspend. Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mr. Jaber's motion for suspension.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick is absent. Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Motion for suspension carries. Motion to adopt. Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 45-2023.
Thank you. Mrs. Coburn.
This wasn't presented by Mr. Heidick with him on this one.
It was forwarded to
Okay.
Mr. Haddock.
I just want to make sure we were doing it right. So I will motion to second his motion on adoption.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mr. Jaber and seconded by Mrs. Coburn to adopt ordinance number 45-2023. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mrs. Thompson?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fry?
Yes.
Mr. Jaber? Yes. Mr. Heidick is absent. Mrs. Angelos?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Motion for adoption carries.
Dispense with first reading.
Second reading of ordinances and resolutions.
There are none.
Thank you. Third reading of ordinances and resolutions.
There are none.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Is there a motion to excuse Councilperson Heidick from today's legislative meeting, March 27th, 2023? Mrs. Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mr. Heidick from this evening's meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mrs. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second Mrs. Thompson's motion to excuse Mr. Heidick.
Thank you. A motion was made by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mrs. Fry to excuse Councilperson Heidick from today's legislative meeting, which is March 27th, 2023. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Councilman Heidick is excused. Communication from the body. Is there anything from council members? Mr. Jaber?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just prayers for the families and victims of another shooting at elementary school, I think, in Tennessee. Just if you guys see something, say something. I mean, we all heard that before. We live in a crazy world. I mean, anything you see or hear, especially when it involves kids, it's a very sad world we live in. Thank you.
Is there anything else from council members? Anything from department heads? Next meeting for council will be April 3rd, which is a committee of the whole meeting. And with nothing else, communication from the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we want to thank council for approving tonight's legislation. A few pieces on improving our parks, 4th Street resurfacing, which that's long overdue. We applied for federal grant money, so Uncle Sam's kicking in about 80%, saving that money from the taxpayers. But also local government fund restoration. If you recall the legislation in front of you, that was for pre-recessionary time. And you heard Councilman Heidick last year with his feelings on Governor Kasich. And that was the first time that had been reduced since it was started in like the 30s. So looking back to see if that could be restored to pre-recessionary times. And then the rail safety. It's so important that in the state government and the federal government are looking at this and really diving into it. So hopefully some quick changes for everyone's benefit are approved here quickly soon. So I want to thank everyone who came out for my open office hours this past Saturday. Some good questions and feedback there. Last week we met with residents on Taylor Road concerning the water line replacement project. Received almost $800,000 in grant funds for this important project, which does include the resurfacing of Taylor Road, so much needed there. So CPR classes tomorrow, still room to sign up if you're interested. Change for Change is this Friday at the Pregame Tavern, benefiting the Barberton Magic Sparkles. Last week was able to meet with several businesses on our business visit program that we have. A few more this week, talk about their operations and how the city can be of a benefit in helping them. So going very, very well. This was a very busy weekend. If you're down at the library, the Bodner twins were in town, and kind of a Michigan reunion because Mr. Larry Ricks was there with his family, mom and dad and sister, and his brother came in as well. So just a lot of great questions and answers and recap of their time here living in Barberton, playing for Coach Grunolds. Some pretty good stories, and then playing at the University of Michigan as well. And so just a great group there. Also the Barberton Theater Group did an amazing job with Mamma Mia at the high school this past week. Great to see our youth doing so many great and cool things here in the community. Sometimes we hear the negative things, but we don't celebrate the positive things, and just so a lot of great things going on here, a lot of talent in town. This Saturday is the first Saturday out of 2 that we have bulk drop-off this weekend for Barberton residents. If you recall, we did this pre-COVID, where residents, show identification and a water bill, utility bill, and they can drop off items at the street department for free. There is a list of what can't be dropped off with hazardous materials and such. We did this before COVID. Really helps reduce the dumping in town. Really helps clean up people's properties, and we're getting into springtime hopefully, so a lot of spring cleaning in the basements and garages. It's a free service. just had a lot of good success with it pre-COVID, bringing it back. So this will be the first of 2 weekends. And then just lastly, I submitted legislation to the Health Committee on paying medical debt. You may have read the letter, and we'll discuss next week. And you may have seen cities like Akron, Cleveland, Columbus, Toledo, Cincinnati are at some point in the process of reviewing this through their city council. Washington, D.C. and Cook County in Illinois, the Chicago area, have been through this. And so we've made a lot of inquiries to the company the nonprofit that runs this and how this operates and functions. And so a lot of great questions that we've asked, we've got some responses back. But I want to make sure that once we start discussing this, and if this is approved, that everybody has a clear understanding of how this works and the benefits, the good, the bad, the ugly of everything surrounding this. And we're staying in contact with those cities. We have copies of legislation that they've been proposed, and staying in touch with not only them, but the state of Ohio and this nonprofit who is running this. But we'll have more information next week. Please read through it. And if you have any questions throughout the week, please contact me. Again, the goal is once we get to vote night, second reading or third reading, that everyone has a clear understanding of what's being approved and the process of how this functions. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions. Yes.
What about tires? Do we have any programs for tires?
No, we used to have a separate program for tires. The company that did the recycling of them went out of business. Reworks, who does the recycling of a lot of things, does not do tires in the bulk that we would deliver them. So we're still trying to put a program together and how we can dispose of those. So,
awesome. Thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, with nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
And I will second it.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. Thompson and seconded by Mrs. Fry that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, this meeting is adjourned at 7:14 PM.